We're all feeling it right now. The cost of the weekly shop is increasing, energy bills are rising, rents and mortgages are up, everything is stretched, for some to impossible lengths. But this isn't just a cost of living crisis, this is a cost of Westminster crisis. Here, the Tories and Labour are focused only on each other, leaving people like us to pay for the chaos that they created with Brexit and all the rest of it. The fact is, Keir Starmer's Labour shows no desire whatsoever to reverse the cruel and damaging Tory policies that got us into this mess. Scrapping pledge after pledge, they've thrown their principles to the wind, and every broken pledge is a kick in the teeth to children, families and communities all over Scotland. But in the Scottish Parliament, we have a government showing that it's on the side of the people it serves. With the limited powers at our disposal, the SNP is helping 300,000 children with more than £1,000 a year through the Scottish Child Payment, increasing access to free childcare, and spending over £700 million to counter the impact of Westminster welfare cuts.
We're doing all we can to help families as prices soar, and we'll continue to do so. But we could do so much more. Independent European countries of Scotland's size are wealthier and fairer than the UK. With all of our resources, with all of our talent, why not Scotland? With the full powers of independence, we can build a country that reflects the values, aspirations and hopes of our people. Not a country held back by Westminster governments we didn't vote for. Westminster is broken. It offers no alternative to the suffering people are facing. So while Labour scrap pledge after pledge, this is my pledge to you. The SNP and the government I lead will always be on your side. At a time when we deserve real change, the Tories and Labour simply offer more of the same at Westminster. In the Scottish Parliament, we will give our all to protect you from the worst of their cruel and heartless policies. We will be resolute in keeping you and Scotland on course for a better future as an independent nation.
Good morning, delegates. A very warm welcome to day 2 of the 89th SNP Annual National Conference. I hope everyone enjoyed a great evening in Aberdeen last night and that you're making the most of the fringe events on offer. If you can, pop into the exhibition area. You'll be able to pick up your copy of Independence magazine and speak to all of the exhibitors too. But to kick off our session this morning, I am delighted to welcome to the stage for a panel discussion on our priorities for Scotland, Jamie Hepburn, Minister for Independence, Shirley-Ann Somerville, Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, and Michael Matheson, Cabinet Secretary for NHS Recovery, Health and Social Care. So welcome to them all.
Well, thanks very much, Kirsten, for that introduction. Good morning, conference. I hope you all had a wonderful day yesterday. I certainly think it was a fantastic day. What a wonderful debate we had on the way forward yesterday. I know we're going to have a great day today as well, and that's going to kick off with this panel discussion. I've got the really easy part. I'm just going to ask the questions, so it's actually Michael and Shirley-Ann that are going to be doing all of the work. No change there, they'll probably tell me, but looking forward to hearing what they've got to say. Yesterday we had that discussion about the way forward. We've come to a resolution and we're going to come together, and the priority now, of course, is to make sure that we're out there working day in, day out to make the case. And you can be quite assured that I'll be doing that, Michael will be doing that, Shirley-Ann will be doing that. There'll be leadership from the government, First Minister down, but we're also going to be relying on each and every one of you to be out there across your own communities to make the case. So that's what we're going to be doing in the coming period. But today is also a chance to remind ourselves of the incredible record of delivery that we've had over what is now an extraordinary 16 years in government for the SNP, showing that we can deliver for the people of Scotland things like free tuition for university students here in Scotland, free prescriptions, investment in our school estate for the benefit of our young people. So we have been delivering for people and their priorities, and we're going to keep doing that. We're still delivering just now, and I'm really delighted that we have two excellent Cabinet Secretaries, Michael Matheson, Cabinet Secretary for NHS Recovery, Health and Social Care, also a supporter of the world's greatest football team, Partick Thistle Football Club, fellow traveller. That was the right response. And also Shirley-Ann Somerville, the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice. I don't know what football team, if any, she supports. Maybe we'll cover that in our discussion. So we can all be a little guilty at times of forgetting what we have delivered. And there's a lot of things we've done that are now just taken as a given. I've talked about some of those things in terms of free tuition, in terms of free prescriptions. They've only come around as a consequence of the political decisions that have been made by us as a party. And we should never, ever forget that. And we should always be reminding the people of Scotland of that record of delivery. So that work obviously continues. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a few questions to my friends here up on stage so that they can tell us some of the areas that they're prioritising in their portfolio, some of the activity they're doing. And Shirley-Ann, I'm going to start with you. You've recently been involved in ensuring the introduction of automatic payments, helping low-income families with social security payments. So I wonder if you could tell us a wee bit about that and some of the other activity that you're doing.
Thanks. And just for full disclosure, I'm a Fife Flyers fan. I'm an ice hockey gal rather than a football fan, I have to admit. But on the issue of what's happening within the portfolio, there's a huge amount that we can be rightly proud of. Jamie's absolutely right. I was just at a fringe event with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation where we were getting shown some polling that they'd undertaken. And one of the key things that came out of that was that we've got a huge opportunity to be able to tell people about what we've actually delivered in government, and Jamie's point about the fact that these things don't happen by accident. They're a political choice that we've made. Some of the aspects within my portfolio really go to the heart of what is important for people at the moment, and that's tackling the cost of living crisis and tackling poverty. So we're actually spending about £3 billion a year tackling poverty and helping people at times of crisis. That's the choice that we've made to make sure we're investing in people. And one of the important reasons for that, and it's a big difference between us and any UK party, and I include very much the Labour Party in that, is we see social security as a human right. We will all, at some point in our life, have to depend on social security, whether it's through illness, whether it's when we have a family. And at that point, we need to be able to be reassured that the state is there for them, that the government is there for you. And you can't say that about the UK government at all. They're rolling back from so many pledges. And again, I make the point that that's not just the Tories, but that's Labour as well. So if you look at that £3 billion we're spending, part of that is, of course, the Scottish Child Payment, called by anti-poverty campaigners game-changing when it came in at £10. It's now £25 per week per eligible child. Now, we've got a job of work to do to make sure that those that are eligible know about it and can claim that, because that is their right. And we've also got a job of work to do to make sure that's as simple and easy as possible. And that's why a lot of the payments that are attached to the Scottish Child Payment are now automated. Now, why does that matter for people? It matters because we are there at times of crisis and at people's times of need, that we're there to make their lives easier. If one of the things that government has got to be there for is got to be there to support people in times of crisis. And one of the ways, one of the many ways we can do that is through social security. And you've saw some of the examples about the the priorities that the First Minister is putting into that. As soon as he got elected, you know, there was the tripling of the Fuel Insecurity Fund. There's also, just within the programme for government, just announced the opening of the Independent Living Fund. So we are all doing our utmost to make sure that at people's time of need, we're there for them. And at the same time, reminding them that we're doing that with limited powers of the Scottish Parliament and how much more we could do if we had the full powers of independence as well.
Thanks, Shirley-Ann. Thanks, Shirley-Ann. I mean, I'm sure Michael would agree. Certainly in my own area, we see the real benefit of the Scottish Child Payment and the delivery through Social Security in Scotland. Michael, one of the things we've seen down south is a raft of industrial action in the NHS in England. We've not seen that here. How have you done it?
So, well, yeah, it's a very good point, Jamie, because one of the things that has happened over the course of the last year in NHS across the UK is it has been plagued by industrial action by its staff, but not in Scotland. And the reason it's not happened in Scotland is because we've made the choice to work with our trade union colleagues, the staff side representatives, in order to try to avoid industrial action. And the reason I say that is because it's important that we all recognise is that our National Health Service isn't the big fancy new buildings, isn't the high-tech equipment that's provided, it's the people who work within our National Health Service. So, when we make an investment in our staff, we are making an investment in our healthcare system and in the quality of healthcare provision that people will receive. And it's because of the actions of this government that NHS doctors in Scotland, NHS nurses in Scotland, NHS allied health professionals in Scotland are the highest paid of any part of the UK. And that's because we value them, their skills and the contribution that they make to our society in providing first-class healthcare right across the country. You only have to now look at the implications that the industrial actions had for England alone. In England, there are now something in the region of 7.7 million people now on a waiting list. They estimate that the cost of the industrial action alone has cost the UK government over £1 billion. And alongside that, over 1 million appointments and procedures have been cancelled. Our NHS and our social care system is under enormous pressure at the present time. It's been building up for a number of years. It obviously came to a particular crunch point during the course of the pandemic, and that pressure is being sustained and is continuing as we go forward. Therefore, my responsibility, this Scottish Government's responsibility in health, is to do everything we can to support those who work within our healthcare system and those who require access to healthcare services. And that's why we made the decision to invest in our staff, and that's why we're taking the approach that we've taken in Scotland in the delivery of healthcare. We haven't gone down the route of privatisation, as you see increasingly happening in other parts of the UK, something which is not just in favour with the Conservative government at the UK level just now, but is also favoured by the Labour Party. They've already set that out as part of their ambitions should they be elected at the next Westminster elections. But we as a government have taken a decision to make sure that healthcare remains within the public sector, delivered on behalf of the people of Scotland. And I'll finish off in this point that we shouldn't forget. Shirley-Ann mentioned some of the actions we've taken around social security. Jamie mentioned some of the measures that we've taken forward, for example, free prescription charges. Each item now in a prescription in England costs £9.65. Let's keep in mind why we abolished prescription charges here in Scotland and why we prioritise that as a government. Because there was evidence that demonstrated many people were finding the cost of prescriptions too high and could no longer afford to take the medication that was being prescribed by their clinicians. If we were in a position where we continued to have prescription charges here in Scotland, probably broadly in line with where they are in England, you can imagine the many households, particularly during a cost of living crisis, who would be quite literally turning their back on the treatment that their doctors are prescribing for them to meet their healthcare needs. That's the tale of two different governments, where we've prioritised investing in our staff, investing in the public sector provision of healthcare, and investing in making sure that we tackle health inequalities. And it's the approach that I'll continue to take, and this government will continue to take, in driving forward our healthcare policy.
Thanks. Thanks, Michael. One of the things that I've been tasked with by the First Minister in my area of responsibility is taking forward the ongoing publication of the Building a New Scotland series of prospectus papers around independence. Now, we've published 5 already, setting out the underpinning economic strengths of Scotland, the economic opportunities that we have, laying out our plans for a written constitution that could guarantee people's rights, setting out our approach to citizenship, not having the reductive approach that we see through the UK government. And that's work that's going to continue. And I'm delivering that with ministerial colleagues. So it's no secret there's going to be one forthcoming on health, there'll be one forthcoming on social security. Just let's be careful, we can't say too much detail because we'll get in trouble from the presiding officer if we don't tell Parliament first. But I suppose the question I would have, we'll start with you, Shirley-Anne, is what difference would independence make to the areas of responsibility you have?
Well, I kind of touched on that in the first answer. It would make an enormous difference. So we can make a huge difference to people's lives with the limited powers that we have if we use them to the maximum. And we are, and we will continue to push those boundaries to make sure we're doing that. And we have made a difference. We've got 90,000 less children in poverty because of the actions that the Scottish Government has taken. But at the same time, you've got a UK government that is dragging people into poverty because of the UK social security system and the aspects around the benefit cap, the rape clause, local housing allowance, which hits you when you're in the private rented sector. All of that remains at Westminster. So we're sitting there doing absolutely everything we can, and we are determined to keep doing that because it is the right thing to do. But we're still doing that with one hand tied behind our back. And that is the utter frustration of trying to tackle poverty in Scotland in the here and now. And I think one of the key points, again, that we have to stress to people is those aspects that I said are the worst of the UK government policies. They're not changing if Labour get in. They're all staying. You know, they're going to have a review. I don't need a review to know that the rape clause is the most abhorrent policy that any government could come up with. But somehow we get into the point where Keir Starmer said in an interview they're going to look to implement it more fairly. Well, that is just an unacceptable position to be into. And I think that's one of the key things that we have to remind people is we will continue to do everything we can to get people out of poverty because it is our absolute first priority in government. But we do that under difficult and challenging contexts. We do that under a context of our capital budget getting cut by the UK government. Again, no signs of that changing if Labour get in. We do that under a system of handouts. We have to wait on the budget coming from Westminster so that we can work out how much money we have to protect the NHS, to invest in the NHS, to protect our public services overall and our education services that Jenny Gilruth was greatly talking about yesterday. We're making a big difference, but that is again so utterly limited by the context that we are in. So what difference does it make to have independence? It's the same that we know all along. We can make the better decisions for people of Scotland here and now. And we need to be able to show what we've done in government and demonstrate to people how much more we could do in independence. A proper real living wage that we could actually implement. Employment law here, maternity law here, changes that we could make to people's lives, whether they're working, they're not working, whether they're disabled, whether they're pensioners, whether they're in rural Scotland, island Scotland. The difference we could make is great under devolution. It could be so much more under independence.
Thanks, Charlene. Mike, what about you've already talked about the privatisation approach at Westminster. Clearly, that could have some effect here. Independence, what difference could that make for our health service and social care in Scotland?
So let me touch upon two areas, Jamie, that it's important for us to become independent because of the impact that it has on our health and our healthcare system here in Scotland. You only have to look back over the course of the last 10 to 12 years where you can see that health inequalities and mortality rates increase. And they increase right from the very point when the UK government started to introduce its austerity policies, which meant that the social net that was provided there through Social Security started getting cut back, and we can see the direct impact that it has on people's lives. So the economic and the fiscal policy that's been taken forward at a UK level is not only damaging people's health, it is quite literally killing people. Austerity policies kill people. Premature deaths and health inequalities widening as a direct result. As an independent country, we would be in control of our own economic policy, able to make sure that we take forward economic policy that is about tackling the ever-increasing inequalities that we have in our society. We only have to look across to our Celtic neighbours in Ireland, operating with a budget surplus to invest in public services, while we're in a position where we have continued cuts to public expenditure as a result of UK government fiscal and economic policy. So the first thing we'll be able to do as an independent country is to run our economy in a way that's about tackling inequality and making sure we become a fairer, more equal society. That would be good for your health. And the second thing we can do, or we need to be mindful of, because of the way in which the UK government's block grant system operates, the Barnett consequentials that we get as a result of the UK government's decision on expenditure. If they spend more money in health, provided by the Treasury, then we are entitled to an allocation of that through the Barnett consequential system. But what's happening with increasing privatisation of the NHS in England is that rather than making the investment from the Treasury into the health service in England, they're actually getting private companies to provide that investment instead. They provide the equipment, they provide the buildings, they provide the staff, and the NHS basically just pays them a fee for the provision of that service. The direct consequence that has for us is it means that there is less capital investment getting into the NHS in England, which has a direct impact on our Barnett consequentials. So as they increase and ramp up their privatisation, the amount of money that Scotland would be allocated for health will increasingly decline in the years ahead. We can't afford to continue to be in a union that is going to privatise a key part of its public sector like the NHS, because it will end up starving our NHS of funding here in Scotland. That's the consequence of the economic and social union that we have at the present time within the UK. So our options are to make sure that we pursue an economic and social policy that tackles health inequalities, creates a healthier, fairer, more equal society, or we remain tied to a system that's increasingly being privatised that will starve our NHS of the essential resources it requires. I know the choice I believe we should make, and it's up to us to make sure we persuade our fellow Scots to follow us in becoming an independent country.
Okay, we've probably got time for one more. I'll see Kirsten's not back, so maybe you're getting this for the whole morning. I don't know. No, there's probably time for just one more question. We talked earlier about what's been delivered so far, but of course, delivery it continues, and maybe useful to know what's coming up. Michael, we know that winter's a difficult period for the NHS. Can you tell us what planning is going on right now to make sure we're ready for that time?
Well, as I mentioned earlier on, Jamie, our NHS and our social care system are under enormous pressure as it stands at the present moment, and that pressure just becomes even more intensified during the winter months. So next week, of course, being mindful of the presiding officer, next week I'll make a statement in Parliament setting out our winter plan. So what have we done differently this year? Well, we started the winter plan development in March. As soon as I actually came into office, it was one of the first pieces of work I commissioned. We have looked at the whole system, brought together all of the different parts of our health and social care system that will play an important role in helping to support the delivery of health and social care during the winter months. And we'll set out some of the financial resources which we're providing in order to support our health and social care system over the course of the winter. So there's a lot of detailed work going in, and given the work we've also put in helping to make sure that we don't face industrial action, it'll also allow us to make sure that our staffing levels are going to be stable during the course of the winter months. But I want to just say a couple of things that are really important in terms of being on my desk, is that as we come out of the pandemic, there are still far too many people who are waiting too long to get the treatment that they require. And one thing Conference can be absolutely assured of is that we plan for the winter, but also planning for the future. That we're planning to make sure that we deliver the level of healthcare treatment that's necessary to get our waiting lists down further than they are at the present moment, but also how we deliver a sustainable healthcare system for the future. How we make sure that as demand increases, as the disease burden increases over the course of the next 10, 20 years, is that our NHS in Scotland will be able to meet those demands. And that's about investing not just in buildings, in equipment, but also investing in our NHS staff and those who will be looking to work in our NHS and social care system in the future. So as we prepare for the winter, be assured that we've very much got an eye on how we also drive our healthcare system and our social care system forward in the future to make sure that we have a sustainable health and social care system that can meet our future demands. And as a government, we are determined to make sure we do that within the public sector with the investment that's needed to make it happen right across the whole of the country.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. We've got all these witnesses now who can testify to how seriously we take the authority of the presiding officer, so that's helpful. I can see Kirsten's over my shoulder, but I think it's fair to put the same question very quickly to Shirley-Ann. What's coming up in social security?
So in social security, one of the biggest things that's going to be coming is the introduction for the carer support payment. So that's our new alternative to carers allowance. What difference will that make? Well, again, we're going to do it in a different way to Westminster, no surprise there. And I'll give one example right from the start. But what we're doing is we're increasing eligibility to those that are in full-time education, because we know that a lot of younger people have been missing out. There'll be other changes to carer support payment once we complete the full rollout as well. There's also other aspects just out with social security which I want to touch on as well, and that's the importance of affordable housing. Now, we have a good track record on delivering on affordable housing, but we know there's a lot more that we need to do. We've seen the publication of the Rural and Island Housing Action Plan, and that demonstrates our commitment to ensure that we're delivering affordable housing right across Scotland, and that we're recognising that that might require different solutions in different parts of Scotland, and taking that very seriously. And our Housing Minister, Paul McLennan, has been doing a huge amount of work, particularly over the summer to make sure that he's getting that plan right for rural and island communities. So our commitment, not just on social security, but also on tackling poverty in other ways, and one of the important ways is around affordable housing, is going to be key for the delivery as we move forward into the winter and into next year. So there is a huge amount that we have done, an enormous amount that Michael, myself, other Cabinet Secretaries are determined to do over the forthcoming years. But we all know that the real prize about how we can make a change for people is with those our powers of independence. So we've got a real opportunity to take out a record of delivery to the people of Scotland, to remind them of what we've already done, to prove to them what we're going to do in the couple of years up until the Scottish Parliament election, and then how much more we can do after that if given the opportunity.
Thank you, Shirley-Ann. Well, thanks both, Shirley-Ann, Michael. Hopefully that's a very clear demonstration that when you hear the nonsense from our opponents that we're not delivering from Scotland, it is exactly that. It is a nonsense. And I can tell you, if it had any ministerial colleague up here, you would have heard a really strong record of delivery as well. Shirley-Ann, Michael, thank you for everything you're doing in government. I've had the easy job, just asking the questions. Maybe you can show your appreciation for my colleagues.
A big thanks to all of our panel. That was a really great way to open up our Monday morning. So, conference, we now move on to resolutions, and the first resolution that we will deal with this morning is number 6, which is entitled Fishing, Marine Protection and Community-Based Conservation, and that will be moved by Angus MacLeod of Shettleston Branch, to be followed, seconding the resolution, by Councillor Glenn Reynolds of Peterhead. So welcome, Angus.
Martin, thank you, Convener. Delegates, I want to start with a story. About 90 years ago, one of our party's founders, Sir Compton Mackenzie, then Lord Rector of Glasgow University, set out to create an organisation to protect traditional fishing grounds and to ensure that Scottish fisheries would provide jobs for generations to come. Alongside him was the folklorist John Lorne Campbell, my great-grandfather Donald MacLeod, known as Ndot, and his brothers, and many other Barra and West Coast fishermen. Together, they created the Sea League, Common Iascarin Namara, to fight for Scottish fishermen and to protect our seas. They organised and campaigned, and then in 1934, the Illegal Trawling Scotland Act became law. But they continued to look at and advocate for sustainable fishing practice and marine protection, following models being used in Norway and the Faroes. Now, times change and technology changes, and our environment is changing. But I tell this story today to remind ourselves that our national movement from its earliest days has sought to empower our fishing communities. So, turning to the text of the resolution, and given the nature of the debate on fishing and the environment, my branch felt it was important we return to first principles. It is a question of values. The resolution is an amalgamated one, including text from Peterhead Branch, Orkney Branch, and Nehellan and Nier CB. And what it seeks to do is reassert the importance of community leadership in our fisheries and marine protection policy. Fundamentally, if we let our communities be involved in policy design, we will have more informed policy that will be workable and that reflects the reality of the sector. In other words, bechor gan yula a vitango gan the hieskerin a dolgemuth is a kuren behe and kunnerst gus an duich a viehug. Ha jalis agus glich gesachke a bechor a viek ches mien jespits and bi me ein klachgig namada. Ha vuth na vunstje de choirschnucken agus de roi vehe as ha I e kria kulter. She kist kjarstis a hasho. And as we are calling for greater community and sectoral involvement from the get-go, the resolution does not seek to rewrite a fishing and marine protection policy in 3 paragraphs on behalf of those communities. Rather, it is a firm statement of our belief and values as the supreme governing body of the Scottish National Party, that fishing and marine protection policy should be led by our maritime communities. There's been much talk about world-leading policy in this sector, and I agree, but world-leading for whom? Let's be world-leading in terms of community involvement and world-leading in terms of promoting sustainable fishing. So, to conclude, and with a further return to first principles, all of us in this room want to be governed by a government that recognises the people as sovereign, not the imperial crown and parliament. So as we look and work towards independence, it is time now to ensure that our policy making looks first to the people, that with a sense of social justice and protecting our most fragile communities, we reject the centralisation and top-down bureaucratic culture forged in Whitehall. Please vote today to support the entirely reasonable and entirely just principle that those who risk their lives working at sea should have a serious say on the policies that affect them. Please support the resolution. One and thank.
Angus. To follow Angus and seconding resolution number 6, please welcome Councillor Glenn Reynolds, who will be followed by Francis Murray.
Good morning, Conference. Conference, I'm very happy to second this resolution as someone within a CA, including Peter Hidd, who were not only behind much of the drafting of the resolution, but is an area world-renowned for its fishing industry. Following the recent selection process, I should also add, Conference, that I also, as the next MP for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, will send... Thank you, Conference. Will send Tory MP Andrew Bowie packing in 2024. An area with its own distinctive coastal community. Colleagues, the process surrounding HPMAs has not been our finest hour, and the Scottish Government is doing the right thing by rethinking this process and its timetable. Fishers believe that consultation and meaningful engagement with communities has not been adequate and will be essential in achieving the greatest benefits from marine management measures that will improve the health of Scotland's seas. A localised approach, colleagues, ensuring that local communities are consulted and have a core role in designating HPMAs, is crucial for these sites to have a significant positive impact on the environment and our coastal communities. The First Minister, Humza Yousaf, had assured MSPs that policies will not be imposed, quote, on communities that don't want them, close quotes, and reiterated that HPMAs are still at a very early stage, with criteria and site selection to be decided. So we must get this right by our coastal communities, still reeling from being used as Brexit poster boys by the Tory party. The fishing industry has said exactly that in terms of the Tory betrayal that they have been subjected to. But colleagues, this HMPA process also sits alongside that currently underway in terms of the local governance review published at the end of August, which found that people like those in Peterhead and other coastal communities desired much greater control over what happens in the places they know best. And this, as stated in the governance review, creates an exciting opportunity to promote what could be the biggest transformation to democracy since devolution. Peterhead is a fishing capital, and in bringing forward this motion, the local fishers worked with the fishing industry and conservation groups on this motion and managed to create something that both camps could agree on. We should be looking at a win-win situation for all stakeholders here. Peterhead have led the way on this, and the Scottish Government can now do the same. Colleagues, please support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Our next speaker speaking in favour of the resolution is Francis Murray of Naheelan and Yar constituency branch, to be followed by David Burkett from Peterhead branch. Welcome, Francis.
Martin Va. We in Naheelan and Yar constituency branch are very pleased to support this resolution, particularly with the important addition of the words "and fully island-proofed" in the first sentence of paragraph 3. Communities and community voice are key to any future fishing and maritime proposals. We must never again present our political opponents with the opportunity to portray this party as being disconnected from our coastal communities, which of course they attempted to do earlier this year, with the Labour Party in particular having the audacity and hypocrisy to ignore its own policy, which is no surprise to any of us, in its rush to condemn the consultation. However, moving away from their false outrage, there was genuine upset and anger in our communities that our government could be even considering such an unwelcome approach to maritime conservation as the late and unlamented HPMAs. So passing this resolution will ensure that local knowledge, local experience and local priorities will be front and centre going forward, and that local democracy will be the winner in our fragile communities. As the First Minister said yesterday, we need to listen to the Scottish people, and this resolution will show that we do intend to listen to the fishing communities and that we are truly the party that serves the interests of all Scotland's communities. Please support the resolution.
Thank you very much, Francis. Delegates, our next speaker speaking for the resolution is David Burkett of Peterhead branch, and he'll be followed by Councillor Brian Goodall. Welcome to David.
Good morning, Conference. It's an honour to support this resolution today. I live in the largest white fish port in, I was going to say Europe. Well, still is in Europe, geographically at least. I'm inclined to that for now. And it's a fishing community I want to focus on today. Colleagues, I'm a seafarer. I've worked in the same harsh seas as they have. I've seen the risks they take. I've wept at funerals for friends who've paid the ultimate price, not in uniform in some far-flung war, but just to provide the seafood that leads the world. Colleagues, I'm sure you guessed by now, it's hard work. The people doing it deserve to be richly rewarded for it. I'm sure we can all understand why recently they felt a little bit unappreciated. And as you can imagine, trying to promote the SNP, independence and return to the European Union has been a sore fecht in our area for a wee while. But colleagues, when the sun didn't rise over Boris's Brexit uplands, when the rivers of milk and honey that were promised didn't flow forth, the anger and disappointment was palpable in my community. And crucially, our seafood and fishing sector were starting to talk to us again. We were starting to mend burned bridges, and we were starting to make progress, and that was until the prospect of the highly protected marine areas came along. No government is ever going to get everything right all of the time, and we have to put our hands up that definitely wasn't our finest hour. The need for conservation is undeniable, but we got that wrong. Conference, quite often in areas like Peterhead in the North East, there's a feeling that a government in Edinburgh is just as remote and out of touch as one in London. And when I, as a loyal party member, started to feel that too, well, alarm bells were ringing. So I was really glad when the Scottish Government decided to pause the implementation. We now have an opportunity to get this right. Conference, no one has a bigger stake in the sustainability of our world-leading Scottish seafood. No one has more lived experience of cack-handed conservation measures being applied by far-off legislators. It's difficult to say that, isn't it? And no one actually knows how to do conservation better than the good people who already catch and process our seafood on our behalf. And my friends, we do very well to listen to them. Successive out-of-touch UK governments have let them down. Boris Johnson's remote and out-of-touch government certainly let them down, breaking every Brexit promise made to them. Let's not have our SNP-led Scottish Government added to that long and undistinguished list. Conference, let's change the story. Let's be the government that listened to them. Let's be the government that empowered them. Let's not be the government that impoverished them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And our final speaker on resolution number 6, speaking for the resolution, is Councillor Brian Goodall.
Good morning, Conference. A few weeks ago, I travelled from Rosyth via Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh to Little Loch Broom with a group of fellow volunteers for the Restoration Forth project. Our mission, and we chose to accept it, was to collect and clean thousands of native oysters that had been specially farmed for us. Scraping and cleaning those oysters was the first stage of a biosecurity process that would allow us to bring them back east with us so they could be released at some specially selected sites into the Firth of Forth. These oysters would become the first native oysters in the Firth of Forth for over 100 years. Restoration Forth is a brilliant example of a community-based conservation project which is restoring two key habitats, native oyster beds and seagrass meadows. The seagrass provides a fantastic habitat with a huge amount of biodiversity, and it also sequesters a significant amount of carbon. And the oysters will hopefully re-establish their own unique ecosystem, providing a new home for a great many different aquatic species. But the oysters also provide us with a cautionary tale, as around 100 years ago, the native oyster beds in the Firth of Forth became the first fishery in the world to be fished to extinction. The idea that humans could impact a species that seemed so abundant was just something that no one ever thought about back then. But now we know better, and we have absolutely no excuse for ever letting such extinction events happen again. So there's no expectation that an oyster fishery would ever be re-established in the Forth, as it's a different species, the Pacific oyster, that is now used in most commercially farmed oysters for human consumption. But as this motion highlights, and as the other speakers have mentioned, there are a large number of other fisheries around our waters which require a focus on sustainability, and this is vital. What's even more important is that this is done in partnership between conservation science and commercial and community interests. That will be the way to provide the most positive future. We also need to recognise that we're in the midst of a biodiversity crisis, and there will be times when the need for conservation will trump local commercial interests. And that will mean a local partnership approach will be more challenging, but it will still be the best way to go. So, Conference, with that note of caution, I hope you will agree the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Brian was our final speaker on resolution number 6. We have no cards in seeking to speak against the resolution. So can I take it, therefore, that resolution number 6 is passed by acclaim? Thank you, delegates. That moves us on to resolution number 7, which is entitled Wind Turbine Planning Policy. And to move this resolution, please welcome Ian Murray from Falkirk South Branch, who is a first-time speaker at conference, to be followed by Councillor Gary Bowes. So welcome to Ian.
Good morning, colleagues. Sabah al-Khair, al-Hurita, Palestine. We're all aware of the issues faced by many households relating to energy poverty. Currently, it's estimated that 23% of all households in Scotland are living in fuel poverty, according to statistics from the Fuel Poverty Panel Scotland in October 23. I'm sure you all know that we live in one of the windiest habitable places in the world. And this morning I'm here to propose a motion that by making use of such a bountiful renewable energy resource, we could assist in alleviating energy poverty for many households in Scotland. We propose to amend the current planning policy to allow small wind turbines to be permitted under acceptable development. Currently in Scotland, planning rules state that you can't place a building-mounted wind turbine on your property without planning permission. Furthermore, any application is automatically declined if the wind turbine is less than 100 metres from a neighbouring property, regardless of the wind turbine size. This 100-metre rule precludes a huge majority of households in the country from benefiting from this free renewable energy source. In our proposal, we state that small wind turbines should be used. So what do we mean by a small turbine? It's now possible to purchase a 2 kilowatt or 4 kilowatt, and I believe up to 7 kilowatt vertical axis wind turbine, which is shaped a bit like a barrel. It stands upright and is not much bigger than a satellite dish on the side of your house. These turbines are capable of generating significant output at very low wind speeds. The rapid evolution of wind technology has led to an increase in the durability and efficiency of these pieces of kit, as well as a decrease in the cost of producing them. In fact, they're now readily available to buy online at Amazon and other retailers. We know that not everyone's a fan of wind turbines, but these are very different from the giant horizontal axis wind turbines that you see in the hills and in our coastal waters. In this proposal, these small domestic wind turbines would be regulated to ensure they're fit for purpose. They would be engineered to cope with our climate, not just the wind, which can be sometimes very strong, but the huge amounts of rain we have to deal with. In other words, you'd only be allowed to mount one on your property if it was an approved model. They would be designed to have a low noise figures, effectively emitting no more noise than that of a fridge when they're generating. They would be limited to maximum dimensions and thoroughly safety tested for domestic use. They would also be designed to minimise visual flickering, which has been known to affect some people prone to photoepilepsy. These small turbines have a design life of around 20 to 25 years and currently a payback time of 1 to 2 years, depending on the model that's been installed and where it's located. So what would happen to households who install these turbines? We know the wind doesn't blow all the time, but a domestic wind turbine, assuming 50% power 50% of the time, will generate 4,380 kilowatts. This equates to £1,401 of electricity at 30p per kilowatt hour, which is the current average cost per kilowatt hour in Scotland. Potentially, this is nearly £1,500 off the average domestic electric bill every year. It's not an insignificant amount of money for people who may be struggling to keep warm or feed their families. The aspiration is to make this type of renewable resource more available to everyone. It's something that we could start to roll out as soon as possible. We know Scotland has a long history of engineering and innovation, and this proposal, if adopted, would have a knock-on benefit to employment through a Scottish Government certification process for licensing the generators. We would need installation technicians and would aspire to create future engineering, design and manufacturing jobs to provide these approved turbines for the domestic market in Scotland. A proposal is that Conference resolves to request the Scottish Government to investigate the viability of amending the Planning Scotland Act to allow domestic vertical axis wind turbines to be erected under permitted acceptable development. Research should also be funded to establish a methodology to test, certify and hopefully manufacture domestic wind turbines in Scotland. We move to implement this proposal during the current Scottish Parliamentary term and subject to appropriate consultation with relevant stakeholders. Conference, please support the motion.
Thank you very much, Ian. Conference, please welcome to the stage to second resolution number 7, Councillor Gary Bowes, to be followed by George Bruce. Welcome, Gary.
Good morning, Conference. Can I firstly thank Ian for bringing this forward? I think it sounds like a small change, but it actually could be something that's very, very significant to domestic properties. Technology has a habit of moving faster than legislation. The 100-metre rule, as Ian has already laid out, is described in the motion. I can only assume that it is for the large wind turbines which we see all over our country, which are producing wonderful electricity for us, and it's actually the cheapest form of production for electricity. will not mention anybody putting a tax on that recently, which is just a disgrace. The capacity figures as laid out in the motion are significant in a domestic environment. I have an electric car myself, and a 7 kilowatt charge when on renewables would be fantastic. National Planning Framework, sorry, I'm on the Planning Committee in Falkirk, so National Planning Framework 4 is still in its infancy, and therefore now is a really good time to bring this forward. You'll be pleased to hear I'm going to keep this nice and short for you. So, Conference, please agree the motion and allow it to go to consultation with the relevant stakeholders. I second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. And following Gary, please welcome to the platform George Bruce of Dundee West Branch, who is speaking in favour. George will be followed by Dave Duggan MP.
Good morning, Conference. Conference, I won't take up too much of your time. This sounds like an eminently sensible motion and an eminently important idea. I work as a renewable energy lawyer, so you can imagine my delight when I realised on my day off I'd come to conference to talk about exactly what I talk about every day at work. Conference, these permissive development rights, though they may seem insignificant, are really, really important. They provide those putting in place developments an easier route to get planning permission than going through a full process. Under the 1992 order, as it stands, and as my colleagues from Falkirk have been laying out, you need a small amount of prior approval, but you do not need full planning permission when you're developing a single turbine in the situations in which they are approvable. As we've been told, that is a situation where they have 100 metres distance from other dwelling houses. Now, I think the idea of considering whether an urban setting could be consulted upon and whether that could be viable is absolutely crucial. Conference, we see developments like this all the time. They will be absolutely necessary for our renewable revolution. But it's also really important that we take everyone with us. Allowing people to microsite, allowing people to feel the real benefits at home of the renewable revolution is so, so important, because as we all know, these turbines will be so, so important, but we need to make sure everyone reaps the benefit of this renewable revolution. That's all I want to say on the resolution. Please pass it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Please welcome to the platform, speaking for resolution number 7, Dave Duggan MP. Dave will be followed by Gilbert West. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Kirsten. Thanks, Conference. I'm very grateful to Falkirk South Branch for bringing this resolution before us today, because it speaks to the situation that we find ourselves in terms of the climate, in terms of climate justice and energy justice. It speaks to the twin priorities of the energy crisis that we find ourselves in, and we're all very familiar as independence advocates about the calamitous injustice of people across Scotland being so energy rich and so fuel poor. It's a situation which is unconscionable and demands significant change to the way that we do things as regards energy. And that's, I think, really what this resolution is seeking to do. It thinks outside the box. It takes a look at a situation which is probably inadvertently creating a drag on renewable energy investment in a domestic and small-scale sense, and says, how are we going to fix that? How are we going to do that? How are we going to help regulation enable rather than prevent domestic and small-scale wind generation? When I'm down at Westminster speaking about energy, I see a dysfunctional Tory government, probably soon to be replaced by an equally dysfunctional Labour government. I see planning policy in England that puts the considerations of visual impact immeasurably ahead of the ambitions of climate justice and attempting to ameliorate the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. Conference, in the latest auction round, which is what the Department for Energy releases energy generation schemes across these islands with. In the latest auction round, almost every single wind generation project was in Scotland, and precisely none, not one megawatt, not even a kilowatt of wind is going to come from England. So yet again, we find ourselves under the Scottish Government, the SNP Scottish Government, leading the way on wind generation. And this resolution is a very helpful signpost to our colleagues in Scottish Government to say that the excellent situation that we've created over these last 16 years with renewable energy and in wind in particular can be improved substantially by allowing small-scale domestic wind. This resolution, colleagues, speaks to the advances in technology which have resulted in a drop in the price of these generators and the quality of them in terms of their noise impact on neighbours. It invites and, in fact, opens the door to Scottish Government to have a consultation which recognises the improvements that have been made with this technology, and it allows people an opportunity to try and take the edge off the colossal energy bills that we pay. Nothing, conference, creates a local supply chain like local demand. If we want to see investment in local supply chains manufacturing this type of equipment in Scotland, then the best way to do that is to create local demand here in Scotland. And yet again, Scotland can demonstrate to the rest of these islands, this is how you do it, and it's the SNP that are going to make it happen here. This resolution speaks to the ambition that the Scottish Government has already shown. We have an ambition in Scotland to have 20 gigawatts of wind by 2030. That is much easier said than done. But despite that, thanks to 16 years of progressive legislation from the SNP and the Scottish Government, we've got 9 gigawatts already. We know the value that wind brings to the climate and to our consumers, or rather it would if we weren't snared into this union with the dysfunctional energy market that we have in the United Kingdom. So while we're producing all this cheap, clean energy, we're still paying 4 figures every year for our electricity. It's a scandal, conference, and it's one that we know well how to rid ourselves on. So, in closing, thank you to Falkirk South Branch. Please support this resolution.
Thank you very much, Dave. Conference, please welcome to the stage our final speaker for Resolution 7, speaking in favour of the resolution, Gilbert West from Western Priest Branch. Thank you.
Morning, Conference. So I actually work and talk with people in renewables every day and active travel, and a common theme that we have in all our conversations is, yes, but. And our conversation usually then descends into various barriers that are caused by outdated planning and procurement regulations, which is why I'm in favour of this resolution to amend and update the planning system to allow building small-scale wind turbines on buildings. The current regulations seem arbitrary. It would be like saying every 7th house and every 3rd street can have internet access. It just doesn't make sense at all in an urban environment. And as has been stated, you know, we're not talking about the 200-metre high kind of wind turbines that we see on the hills of Dumfries and Galloway or offshore. We're talking about a small metal or fiberglass cylinder that's 3 foot by 1 foot. You know, it's negligible in terms of impact on the visual environment. They have a role in urban areas on buildings where solar may not be viable because of shading issues or structural issues. So they do have a great role there. And while, you know, in terms of the size of these things, we'd need, say, 1,500 mini turbines to produce the same amount of electricity as, say, one of these turbines that we see here. You may think, well, why bother? Why not continue to invest into large-scale wind? But it is worthwhile because the resolution suggests that we actually use the low-voltage transmission poles in rural areas to host these turbines. There's 500,000 of these utility poles out there, which is a great idea because it actually avoids a lot of the ground turbulence that you get that reduces the efficiency of turbines. And so even if we utilised, say, 20% of these transmission poles, we'd actually build a distributed power station of around 700 megawatts installed capacity. So again, it's not a massive amount, but it is starting to become equivalent to, say, a couple of medium-sized wind farms. So about 12.5% of our current electricity demand. So it is a win for further decarbonisation of the grid, but it's actually a lot more than that. We're talking about energy co-ops in urban areas where local people can have a hand in their energy generation. We're talking about jobs and ongoing work for decades in rural areas. And we're also talking about small-scale domestic manufacturing, fabrication and maintenance, the development of transferable skills, the like of which will actually go on and people will be able to use those in other areas of completing the energy transition. So please vote for this resolution.
Thank you very much, Gilbert. Delegates, we have no more cards in for this resolution and no cards in to speak against. Can I take it, therefore, that you are content to pass this resolution by acclaim? Thank you, Conference. Small public service announcement, because there was a lot of interest in that resolution. There is a fringe event on at lunchtime on the same topic, Unlocking Scotland's Offshore Wind Potential, which is in Conference Suite 1A at 12:30. So you may wish to go along there, and you will see all of the fringe events detailed in your conference guide. There are fringe events, I think, for everybody and every area of interest. A couple of other points just to make to you. There are events on in the evenings as well, and I know that people had a good time at various of these yesterday. I see that West Hill, Kintore and Blackburn branch have very creatively organised a conference canvas and comedy night, and I like the sound of that. A bit of canvassing before you get your comedy night sounds like a very good use of time to me. So canvassing in Blackburn is at 6:30, followed by comedy night at 8 o'clock. So if you want to go out there and lend them a hand with that, I think that will be very well received, and I'm sure it'll be a good evening. And just before we move on to resolution number 8, I'd like to highlight to you that there are 2 topical resolutions which have been agreed for this afternoon. The titles of these are, firstly, extension of residency permits for displaced Ukrainians, and secondly, asylum process. The text of these resolutions is on the website, so you can have a look at that just now and get cards in if you would like to speak. And if you have a topical resolution that you would like to submit for tomorrow, then you can do so by emailing debates@snp.org before 9:30 tomorrow morning. And as ever, if you want to speak in any resolution, in any debate, if you get a card from the stewards who are at the side of the hall, see them helpfully holding them up so you know where they are, and get that to us on the stage, then we will always do what we can to have a balanced and representative debate. So with thanks to you for bearing with me through all that, we will now move on to resolution number 8, which is entitled Rural New Entrants Fund. And this resolution will be proposed by Lucy Beattie of Wester Ross branch. Lucy is a first-time speaker at conference, and our next speaker seconding will be Marie Todd, MSP. So please welcome Lucy Beattie.
Thank you very much. My name is Lucy Beattie. I'm the second officer of the Wester Ross branch. I'm also standing as a prospective candidate for the area of Caithness, Sutherland and Easter Ross at the next Westminster election. Conference, there is scant opportunity for young people to access housing in remote and rural areas. Scotland, the nation, our nation, is a civic society. And as mentioned yesterday, Scotland's greatest resource is the people of Scotland. Yet, in our remote and rural areas, we are witness to a population decline that has gone on for centuries. and a significant decline is still happening in modern times. We may see areas of the Northwest's population drop by 12% in 2040. So what are some of the headline figures? In the Highlands, working age population has declined by 3.2% over the last decade. Compare that to the rest of Scotland, where the working age population has grown. 45% of businesses struggle to find staff accommodation, and key workers struggle to find accommodation. Now, the Highlands has 51% of Scotland's land mass, yet these are startling figures when you look at the figures for people waiting for houses on the Highland Council waiting lists. School rolls are falling, and they're falling fast. Ullapool High School, for example, went from 250 pupils when it was opened as a new high school in 1999, which has dropped to 185. Gairloch High School is at 89 pupils, Kinlochbervie High School 33. Durness Primary School has just 2 pupils. So undoubtedly, supply and demand comes into play here. For example, if you look at the average house price in Gairloch last year, this was £300,000. Stack that against a wage average in the Highlands of £28,000 a year. Stack that against problems which have been brought to us from south of the border with the crippling rise in interest rates that has come about on mortgages. So many of you will know that Professor James Hunter has written on this, and he wrote for the Scottish Land Commission in his report in 2019 that recommended routes for the repeopling of the Highlands. And the SNP is committed to promoting all Scottish interests. Therefore, I ask you to support this resolution that proposes routes that will support young people, as defined per the EU definition for agricultural areas, those aged 40 and under, to access land or housing through support to access low-cost routes to finance or buying. Now, this resolution has been supported with a lot of input with folks from the Sutherland branch, the Westeros branch, and Inverness City, and I'm grateful for everyone who gave their input today to bring this to you. So that land and housing resources are protected by a right of preemption, we would like to guarantee that these resources are protected as well for social housing in the future, where deemed necessary, and to use these measures to continue and to perpetuate the good work that could be brought about by a fund like this. So that land assets in the public sector can be identified and made available to new entrants at their current use value, we would also like you to support this resolution so that these assets can be identified and made available. Now, there are lots of positive case studies for targeted community-led housing which abound, and they have been greatly supported by a number of measures brought about by the Scottish Government. For example, in Loch Broom, a development in 2008 saw 1 GP retained in our area, 1 mountain rescue medic, 1 teacher, 1 oyster farmer, 1 marine biologist, 9 children. But we propose that this resolution and these measures will bring more vital change to rural areas. This support will give a clear message to young people looking to access housing. And so let's bring this change. Let's say, welcome, we need you, come home. So to conclude, I'll ask, how can we reach a situation where more land is realised for housing, where land is not held on hope value or on speculation by developers? Undoubtedly, this is linked to land reform, and there is a lot of good work that's being done right now through the Scottish Land Commission and the Housing Directorate. And there will be more work to do, and it should and will continue. But a rural new entrants fund will help bridge these gaps. It will help to empower our communities and to empower our young people and to keep rural Scotland thriving. I would ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And to second resolution number 8, please welcome to the platform Marie Todd, MSP.
Conference. I'm very glad to second this resolution, and I'm really proud of the work that my branch have done to propose a solution to one of the most vexing challenges that we face, not just in Wester Ross, but in many parts of rural Scotland. As MSP for Caithness, Sutherland and Ross, and as Minister for Social Care, I am acutely aware of the ageing demographic that we face in my part of the world. We've suffered centuries of depopulation. In recent years, the pandemic has pushed the price of housing in rural areas right up. We've had an influx of retirees who are, of course, very welcome, but they're often cash buyers, and young people cannot compete. Brexit has almost destroyed us in the Highlands. So we had a falling birth rate for decades, and in 2000, that birth rate started to rise, and that was because of all of the Eastern Europeans who came to live in the Highlands. But because of Brexit, which of course the conference needs no reminding, we voted resoundingly against, many of our European friends and neighbours have left, and no more are coming. Every industry is suffering labour shortages. To give you an example, I live in Ullapool, a really fabulous place. Many of you will have visited on holiday. Now, our restaurants in Ullapool, at the height of the summer season, were unable to open 7 days a week because we don't have enough people to work there. Every industry is suffering. It's not just hospitality, it's not just social care. Most of our businesses can't grow because the limiting factor is not having enough people to work in them, not a shortage of market. Many of our villages are becoming unbalanced, so if more than half of your houses in your village are holiday homes, it's pretty hard to keep your school open. And Lucy detailed the falling school rolls that we have all over the Highlands. So I want to draw your particular attention to the one line in this resolution where social housing or self-build homes are proposed, a permanent residence restriction on use and resale would apply. That, I think, is absolutely vital. We need government support to restore our population in the Highlands, but where government support is given, it can't possibly be then within a few years become a second home. Where government support is given to homes, they must remain homes. Now, there are a significant number of unoccupied properties. Mortgages aren't always available for that type of purchase, and this fund would enable new entrants to access risk-free funds, to purchase sites, to make capital improvements. Conference, if depopulation is not addressed, the cost of supporting rural communities will continue to rise. This measure will pay for itself over time. Thriving rural communities are vital to Scotland. I'd go so far as to say you can't survive without us. We're doing all the important stuff. All the energy is up our way. All the food, the crofters, the fishers, the farmers, we produce all of that. We are absolutely vital to the health of this nation. So, Conference, I'm asking for your help and support. Support the motion, support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. Delegates, with no further cards in to speak on resolution number 8 and no cards in to speak against, can I ask if you are content to accept that resolution by acclaim? Thank you very much, delegates. So moving on in our programme, you will see that the next item on our agenda is something that is always a highlight of our conference, the fraternal address from Plaid Cymru. So I'm really delighted to welcome to conference the member of the Synod for Ynys Môn since 2013 and since June 2023, the leader of Plaid Cymru, Rhyn ap Iorwerth. A huge welcome to Rhyn.
Friends, Carajin, Cyfeillion, a very good morning, pushing afternoon to you. It's a real honour to be here with you in Scotland today among friends, old and new. We'd coordinated our conferences rather well this year. The SNP in Aberdeen and Plaid Cymru in Aberystwyth last week. This act of solidarity between our two Abers, reflecting the strong bond between our nations. And let me say thanks to your Aberdeenshire man, your spokesperson on Wales, Richard Thompson, for addressing our conference in Aberystwyth. Richard, I hope you felt a very warm welcome there. The welcome I've had here certainly confirms to me the deep affection between our parties. It's my first visit, actually, to Aberdeen, somewhere I've always known as a proud footballing city from my football sticker collecting days of my childhood. And let me congratulate you as a proud footballing nation on qualifying last night for next year's European Championships in Germany. We're not there quite yet. I did watch Wales edge closer to qualifying with a wonderful performance last night. But I tell you what, I have to be very, very careful here. Scotland has inflicted plenty of pain on Wales in footballing clashes over the years, so perhaps least said the better. It's also my very first visit to Scotland since becoming leader of Plaid Cymru, but already today your welcome has made me feel like an honorary Scot, even if only for one day, so thank you so much. Before I delve further into our shared vision, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Hamza Youssef for his kindness and hospitality today. Our thoughts in Plaid Cymru are with Hamza's family, in Gaza, and with all the innocent civilians in both Israel and Palestine who are enduring the pain of this ongoing tragedy. It takes a person of great strength to speak with such clarity and compassion during such trying times. Scotland, you are fortunate to have Hamza as a leader who stands firmly for justice. We're both relatively new leaders, so let me introduce myself. The leader of Plaid Cymru since June this year. I marked a decade since being elected to our Parliament, the Senedd, this summer. But before that, I spent nearly 20 years as a journalist and a broadcaster. I only had the pleasure of attending an SNP conference once as a political correspondent, I think many years ago in Perth. And I can assure you that being here giving this address on behalf of Plaid Cymru is a lot less stressful than chasing politicians around with a news camera. But I'll still chase a few of you for some selfies later on in the day, perhaps. I've lived and worked across Wales, born in the southern valleys, then moved further north to Gwynedd, then further north still to the island of Ynys Môn. I later studied in Cardiff, where my wife Chinos and I started our family, and then we brought up our 3 children on the island that I'm now so proud to represent. And that experience guides my politics. I'm clear, Plaid Cymru is a party for all of Wales, north, south, east and west, urban, rural, those who speak Welsh and those who don't. One Wales, like one Scotland, 2 European nations working together as one team. You know, both our parties have been through challenging times of late, but the need to build a better future for the people of our nations means that being downbeat just isn't an option. Those political challenges may seem at times as if we're performing some political high-wire act, daunting and precarious, but I and we in Plaid Cymru know that it's challenges like this that strengthen our focus and our resolve. In 1979, Wales voted no to devolution. Many believed we'd lost for good, but the spark of hope was never extinguished. And in 1997, a week after Scotland had said yes, so did Wales. We wouldn't be muted again. We could finally raise our voice as a nation. And in the years since, whether in opposition or in our time in government, Plaid Cymru has been consistent in the vow that we make to the people of Wales. We will always stand up for them. We have no London party bosses to keep us in check. Our focus will always be on our communities and our nation's interests. That's what makes us different. Plaid Cymru exists to give Wales a voice, just as the SNP gives Scotland a voice. What's clear from the energy here in Aberdeen is that this is a party as determined as ever to raise that voice, to speak up. You are the spark that still ignites. I know our sister party, the SNP, will never give up on Scotland's future, just as Plaid Cymru will never give up on Wales's. Conference, I am so proud, as Plaid Cymru's new leader, to be renewing our shared political partnership today. Hamza and I have today committed to strengthening our bond. The SNP and Plaid Cymru share a long history, bound by a common cause to support our communities today, whilst looking to tomorrow and our opportunity to forge fairer and more prosperous nations through independence. From the days of Gwynfor Evans and Winnie Ewing, our parties have stood side by side and have crafted a unique alliance in these islands, one that we will endeavour to strengthen further. Our shared mission is to improve the lives of the people of our respective nations, in stark opposition to the inequality at the heart of the United Kingdom. And remember, we're never driven by wanting to break up a family, but rather to give each member of the family the tools needed to succeed. Together, we want to build a future where our communities thrive and where our children can reach their potential. This is not just a partnership, it is a bond of solidarity. It is a bond of solidarity, and today we're renewing that bond, guided by our shared principles of fairness, equality, and crucially, self-determination. As we approach the next UK general election, let's get the message out that we are the alternatives to the cosy Westminster consensus. Our communities are close to buckling after 13 years of Conservative austerity. People are struggling to make ends meet. Living standards across the UK are plummeting. But faced with this dire reality, what does Keir Starmer propose? A veneer of competence, but with a glaring absence of the empathy and compassion that our communities need. He pledges to maintain the cruel two-child benefits limit, just more competently. He promises to persist with inhumane anti-asylum policies, but to do so efficiently. He's content to deny opportunities to our children by following in the Tories' Brexit footsteps. And yes, we're the only parties in our nations that really call out the Tory Brexit for what it is, an utter failure that's costing us dearly. And the refusal of the Westminster parties to engage with that Brexit reality makes one thing clearer than ever. Our European futures must be in our own hands. Both Westminster parties show a frightening lack of ambition. We deserve better, and that's where the SNP and Plaid Cymru come in. We can and will make a stand for a brighter and a more compassionate future. After the blues of 13 years of Conservative rule, and as Labour's red fades into a dull grey, the SNP yellow and the green of Plaid Cymru are needed more than ever. Our message is clear. Together we stand for hope, we stand for fairness and ambition, in stark contrast to the Westminster politics of indifference. There wasn't a single mention of Wales in Keir Starmer's speech last week. Not one. Wales has voted Labour for a century, and that's the thanks we get. We in Plaid Cymru look up to what you have achieved in Scotland. You've shown that real change can be achieved by acting boldly in government. Thanks to the SNP, Scotland is becoming a pioneer in reducing child deprivation and lowering inequality for children. The Scottish Child Payment has been called a lifesaver. 316,000 children have benefited, with 90,000 lifted out of poverty this year. Now that's a record to be proud of. That's how we show. That's how we show our party's ambition compared with both the Conservatives and Labour. Labour want to deny benefits from the poorest children just because they have siblings by keeping the Tories' two-child benefits cap. We are delivering. In Wales, it's only thanks to Plaid Cymru that Labour agreed to introduce universal free school meals. They'd voted against. Time and time again, we made sure it was delivered. And Conference, it's by ensuring that Plaid Cymru and the SNP return a strong group of MPs that we can stand up against the condemning of our children to more austerity of ambition. Only we will hold Westminster parties to account, both Tory and Labour. So, Conference, friends, we stand united here today. Scotland and Wales, the SNP and Plaid Cymru. We stand at a crucial juncture, but we do so together. We will confront the challenges ahead together with clear-eyed determination and never, ever forget that we represent the hope and ambition that our communities so desperately need. We stand against the politics of indifference. We've achieved milestones that have defied cynics in the past, and we will do so again. Let's fight the next election with optimism for a better Scotland, a better Wales, and a better future for all our people. Plaid Cymru will be with you all the way. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very much, delegates. Conference, our party and our movement is built on the hard work and the dedication of our amazing SNP activists. It's truly the case that we stand on the shoulders of giants. So I'm delighted to welcome to present the President's Prize, our own party president, Michael Russell.
Thank you, Kirsten. The context for the President's Prize is always service to the party, service to Scotland, furthering the cause of independence. But each year when I'm looking for the person to receive the prize, I talk to quite a number of people about the issues that affect them, the people who have impressed them, and the ideas that we need to talk about at this moment in the SNP. And one of those was touched upon actually by our friend from Plaid Cymru. It was a feature of the debate that you've just had on Rural New Entrants Fund. And it's about the way in which the SNP and the relevance of independence touches every single part of Scotland. As a former rural MSP of a constituency that had 23 inhabited islands, I called out for the rubbish it was, the idea that in some sense the SNP was a central Scotland party or an urban party. The SNP is the party of the whole of Scotland. And those parts of Scotland that need the biggest help, the biggest support, the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, have had it from this party and will always have it from this party. And that is particularly well known amongst those who work in the branches and constituencies within the Highlands and Islands, where people have laboured long and hard to make sure that the message gets everywhere. And sometimes that's a little harder than doing in the middle of cities. There may not be tenements to climb, but there are very long roads to drive, and sometimes they're difficult to drive in the middle of winter. But people keep going. They keep going to get the message across and to make sure people are supporting the SNP because they've heard the message of the SNP. And therefore, I want this year to award the President's Prize to somebody who has worked tirelessly for independence and for the SNP in Wester Ross. Sandy Mackenzie is here today, and I'm shortly going to go down and, with Hamza and present the prize to him because he can't come up and join us. But Sandy Mackenzie has had a remarkable career within the SNP, not looking for a career, but looking to help his fellow citizens, his fellow members, and the area which he comes from and in which he lives. And amongst the many achievements, including making sure councillors were elected, making sure MSPs were elected, making sure MPs were elected, was ensuring that in the communities, for example, the community of Ullapool, people turned out and voted yes in 2014. Now, regrettably, we're going to have to ask them to do that again. But if they do that in even greater numbers, then the Highlands of Scotland will be like the rest of Scotland, pointing the way to independence. I want to thank Sandy on behalf of this party for all the work that he has done. And I want to point out that there are, hard as Sandy has worked, there are people in every part of Scotland, in every SNP branch in Scotland, and in every constituency in Scotland who deserve this honour too. And I hope over the next 12 months to spend some time talking to those people and to recognising others who have contributed so greatly. And I'll be later in the year asking people to bring those names forward. But I want to thank Sandy today and thank him on behalf of the SNP. It is because of Sandy that the flame burns so brightly still in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland.
Don't know how long that's going to be. Thank you very much. Congratulations. I never got to call the El Presidente. I have to. This is yours, sir. Shall we get the picture of the three of us together?
Can you come into the light a bit more? Yeah, yeah. Just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. That's about there, yeah.
in.
Oh, yeah,
Come in.
come on.
I think there's a gentleman here for the last one. There's always one more. Okay. Thank you. I'm your guys' biggest supporter. Well done. Congratulations.
Behind all great men, we know. Let me say hello to another quick friend.
Thank you very much, delegates. Huge congratulations to Sandy on this well-deserved award. I hope you all enjoy your lunch, enjoy visiting fringe events and the exhibition area, and we'll see you back sharp at 2 o'clock.